Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome back, guys.
So, today's episode is going to be following really closely on from our last one when we were discussing about how difficult it is when you hit 30, feeling as though you've lost yourself. And we thought it might be quite nice to explore that in a little bit more detail and talk about codependency and how that shows up in your relationships, what it means for you, where it stems from, but also how you can break that cycle.
Yeah, we've had a lot of comments about people feeling lost, like you said, in their 30s. And I think that's really important to touch up on it in today's episodes because it's a real subject that everyone struggles with daily. And like we've said before in our previous episodes, they don't quite know where to start and how it affects their life and how they can change it basically in the everyday life with anything, relationships, work, family.
I think the difficulty is when you have such a busy life. You might be a wife, a mom, you are constantly on the go. You might have a full-time job, or you might be a full-time stay-at-home mom. The issue that we're seeing quite a lot of in today's society is the demands placed on a woman because of expectations of other people. Now, there is a fine line between, having those demands and living a healthy life or having a healthy relationship, and then also feeling and being codependent on other people. And I think the key here is that codependency. It's when your happiness or your purpose in life is really closely aligned to your partner's. And that is when you start to feel that loss of the sense of purpose, the sense of self that we discussed in episode 13.
Yeah, but I think a question that needs to be asked, how do you know you are codependent? Because some people might not know and might get confused with the term as in, am I codependent or am I not? Or am I independent? What is that fine line where you can see in your life, where are the traits coming from? How are they showing up?
I think straight away, it's if you feel like you don't have a sense of direction, you don't know who you are anymore. You feel as though your whole life, your whole world and purpose is centered around other people. So you're constantly doing things for your partner or your children, and you're always on the back burner. So you're feeling burnt out, stressed out, not feeling like you know who you are, not really being able to identify your own hobbies or your own likes or your own dislikes, not making your own plans because you're always aligned to what other people in the household are doing. It's really a complete loss of your own identity because you've spent so long pleasing other people and really just doing everything you can for everybody else and really neglecting yourself.
But then the guilt kicks in though, because you're not showing up for someone that you've showed up for a very, very long time. And you got into that pattern of, well, that's all I know. I don't know anything different. So what happens then when you are trying to do a bit more self-care and, prioritize your needs to an extent, because we all need to do that, then what I find, I see people feeling guilty and put themselves down because of it. And that again, how does that show up? Is that coming from a place of need or want? Do I need that person? Is that a big part of my life where if I don't do this, then is the end of the world? Or do I want to do that particular thing for that person? Because I think that's really important to ask yourself. If you constantly feel like you need to do something for someone, I think that's enough to know that it's an issue there. And then you need to truly want something, to do something for someone. Personally, I think that's what it comes down to.
Definitely. And, this ties in actually really closely with our episode on self-sabotage.
Yeah.
So feeling guilty that you're not showing up for somebody as you always have done. That, again, there's two different elements to that, isn't there? There's being there for someone genuinely, but then there's also being there for somebody at the sacrifice of your own needs. And that's what we're talking about here. That's what codependency is. It's sacrificing a part of yourself to please somebody else. Now, if you're feeling guilty because you can't fulfill somebody else's needs, that is a form of self-sabotage because it stems from an unmet childhood need. So you have to really look back at your patterns growing up. You know, why do you feel the need to put others before yourself? Why do you minimize your own needs? Why do you maybe perhaps dim your own light or shy away from expressing yourself? It could be because your needs weren't met when you were younger. It could be that you had, you know, caregivers who were quite judgmental or quite controlling or quite dismissive of your needs. Or it may well be that it's linked to how people showed up for you. You know, did you have a caregiver, for example, who was always providing for the other partner or the other parent? And has that been your kind of learned pattern of behaviour? So it's really important, if you are in that situation, you start to really take a good look at where those patterns of behaviour are stemming from.
I think that's like the first step, isn't it? You have to look back. And I know sometimes we don't like to look back because we speak about, you know, it's not too healthy to go and look back in the past. But I think in this situation, you have to look at the patterns that you've been used to, how you've been brought up. You know, like you said, it could have easily been someone in your family that, you know, showed us those patterns, and you didn't know any different, and you just picked up on them and then, you know, took them in your adulthood. And now you are left feeling lost and not knowing what to do because it's not quite working for you, whatever you're doing. And I think that that's where it all stems from, is like that empty feeling where I don't know what I'm doing wrong. And then you genuinely sit there and you don't know. And you think, is there something wrong with me then? And then you start that self-sabotage where you're overthinking. You think that it's definitely something to do with you, when it could be coming from your past. And it doesn't have to be your family, by the way. It can come from a very various, like it can be from work. You know, have you been, you know, not praised enough at work? Have you ever felt like you're a failure at work? Or was your environment really toxic? You've never been able to show your potential or not being heard, really, when you're trying to speak up about something in your work environment. Relationships, I mean, relationships are a very big one, I think, because I think you spend most of your times with your partners at home. And even although family plays a big, massive part of your life, your other half of your life is your partner. And I think that's where the triggers come from mainly. And what I've experienced in the past, and many of the people that I know in my life, where that's where it all starts from, and everyone gets triggered from that point on, from relationships.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree with all of that. I think a really important point to always carry with you is we all learn how to cope and adapt to our environment, and we learn that through our experiences. Our coping strategies aren't something that we're born with. We're not born with an innate ability to be able to regulate our emotions or manage our anger or really express ourselves. We learn all of those strategies through our interaction with other people or through our relationships with key people around us. Yes, our childhood forms that blueprint, it forms those foundations, but they're also then reinforced through our other experiences, like you've just said. So our experiences of friendships, relationships, our work environment, the things that we spend our time doing the most has the most impact on us. So how we learn to deal with and manage our emotions and show up for ourselves is really important. And if we've learned to kind of minimize our feelings or not really want to showcase how we're feeling for fear of being judged or ridiculed or criticized, and we really dim our own light, then that pattern is going to be repeated and reinforced the longer we're practicing it. And I think what happens is when women particularly do hit their 30s and they've been in this pattern of, you know, self-sabotage, we don't really want to show our feelings. We're really, really focused on being a provider, being a mother, being a wife, you know, having a great career, whatever it is. You are self-sabotaging your own needs, and that is when you start to lose that sense of identity and you feel as though you're suddenly dependent on everybody else's happiness. And that's what codependency is.
Yeah, but I think that kind of contradicts itself sometimes, I think, in some situations, because some mothers would be out there and be like, yeah, but I want to be a mother, a good mother, but I also want to have a career. And how do you balance that? Because it's all in the balance. You can't do it all to perfection. Everything. It's impossible. Like, you can try, but you will, I hate using the word, but you will be slacking somewhere. So maybe if you're focused in your career, you might not be able to spend as much time with your family, and vice versa. If you're so focused into your family life, you might not be able to be focused at work because there's a lot going on in your brain. You know, as women, we know that our brain is constantly, it's never silent. Like, I can't sit down and ever hear silence in my head. There's always something. Oh, have I done that? Have I washed that? Have I packed that? It's always something in the back of our mind. And I think what we need to point out, like, what is an easy way to, you know, what are the key points here? How can we start to recognize these little issues in our life? Because a lot of people struggle with it. They don't know where to start. It's not as simple as we're saying or how we're putting in this podcast, but it can be really hard for people to sit there and be like, well, I actually don't know. How do I start this?
So codependency is really closely linked to anxiety as well, and perfectionism. So you can want everything to be perfect for other people around you. Like you've just said, it's really difficult to find that balance of, you know, you want to be there for your husband or your children. You also want to go to work, but you can't pour from an empty cup. You have to start showing up for yourself. Otherwise, you will crash and burn at some point. And I think focusing particularly on relationships, codependency also goes hand in hand with abusive or toxic relationships as well. However, it can also show up if you have been the person who has maybe put your kind of yourself on the back burner while your partner goes and pursues their goals or their career aspirations or whatever it is that they kind of have their sights set on. You've taken a back seat and you've allowed them to go and fulfill that. Now, there doesn't have to be any element of abuse there. It's just an imbalance of power. It's really important to start to think about, what is it that I want? We only get one life, and I think you've got to just grab it with both hands. Yes, it is difficult to find the balance between having it all, but we're not talking about having it all here. What we're talking about is showing up for yourself, thinking, well, who am I? You know, what are my likes? What are my dislikes? Am I being respected in this relationship, in this environment? Do I have an opportunity to pursue my goals or my dreams and my aspirations? And am I supported in that? And that's the difference, because if you are supported in that, you can start to take those small steps to truly fulfilling who you are as a person. Because I think lack of purpose and lack of direction in life is one of those really key foundations for later poor mental health. So it leads to anxiety, it leads to depression. It's because you are not focusing any attention on your own self-care.
I know. I think it's a difficult one, this, because you instantly think, well, I'm not allowed to do that, or I can't do that, you know, and where's that fine line of your happiness? Like, okay, maybe you are in a relationship or you've been brought up in a family where there's been very strict rules and, you know, there's been clear that you couldn't do certain things. And how do you then go and be like, well, no, because I'm not happy. I don't want to do this. I think you just have to be very, very clear, like you said, in what you want and not what you need from someone, because it's completely different. I mean, I could be thinking I need something badly, but do I want it? Is that going to serve me in the long run? Because ultimately need is more like being scared, isn't it? That's how I can describe it. Want is more like, is your true self, is what you actually desire in life to do, career, kids, whatever you might want to do. But I think I've experienced this in my own life, you know, when I was younger and I didn't know better, it would always be like, yeah, but I need this so badly and I can't live without this thing. And you panic. That's your instant, you know, response is panic. And then what do you do then? Because you're in that mental state where, again, is a vicious circle where you can't have that brave attitude to just stand up for yourself and be like, no, I don't want this. Do you know what I mean? It's a hard one. I feel like it does take maturity, I think, to an extent, to be able to stand up for yourself and say, this is enough. This is what I don't need. This is what I actually want. And I think it only comes with time after you got to know yourself better.
It's so true, because that needs versus want is all about need is your safety net. Need is where your patterns are, that predictability, and whether that predictability is toxic or not, your body can't distinguish between that. So the safety and predictability, and even if that predictability is chaos or stress or constantly doing things for other people, if that's what you've always known, that's going to be your go-to to feel safe, because discomfort isn't change, whether that's change for the better or not. There's always discomfort with change, and that's what prevents people moving forward. So really if you need to be needed or wanted or have to be doing things for other people, you've got to really stop and ask yourself where that is coming from and what part of you that is really feeding. And it will often boil down to your inner child and how you have been perceived and how you've shown up for other people in the past. Whereas want is something completely different. And a lot of the time, the guilt comes from people thinking want is selfish. And it's not, because you always have to prioritize yourself, because you can't show up for other people not being the best version of yourself, because you won't be the best version of them. And it doesn't have to be any big grand gestures or any huge change. It can start with, like you've just said, just really looking into yourself. It's like that introspection. It's thinking about, well, who am I? What do I truly want from life? What makes me happy? Not as opposed to, well, what do I need? And I think, you know, simple things you can start doing is just start journaling your thought process, to start identifying those thinking traps that we all fall into, those patterns, and then start to challenge them.
Oh, I think a good one is talking to yourself. I think that really helps, because some people do not have the energy to journal or don't even know how to do it. But I don't know about you, but I sometimes talk to myself as I'm having a conversation. It sounds crazy, but like I'm having a conversation with someone because I'm saying it out loud. I think that's quite important. And it's asking those difficult questions of, you know, okay, well, I think it's coming from here, but why is it coming from here? Is it sure coming from here? You have to have these like silly conversations with yourself because they do help you to kind of narrow down where this behavior and the need to make someone happy constantly, or maybe you got bullied when you were younger. It only takes to get bullied once, by the way, and that will trigger you for a very, very long time. And it's happened to me in the past where I got bullied at school and it's followed me for such a long time, and it only started getting better when I matured enough to realize that actually it was just one event in my life that made me feel uncomfortable, which made me try and make everyone else happy around me. And I started to become unhappy with myself because I was not being myself. I was just trying to please everyone, people pleasing. Again, that's a big one. And I think that is, again, you know, that person that's friends with everyone. That doesn't mean that you can't be a friendly person. Why do you feel the need to be everyone's friend? That's a big, massive question you need to ask yourself. Is it because you like being in the center of attention? Or is it because you need to fill that void of something inside of you that needs to be, oh, I need to be everyone's favorite. I need to be everyone's friend because that is fulfilling for me. And it's endless examples that we could give today to make you realize where that's coming from. But there's main ones, I think, that are more obvious than others, because there's ones that are maybe like a little bit like an undercover situation where you wouldn't know where to start from. But I think a big one is to ask yourself, how am I feeling? How's my nervous system feeling around a particular person, for example? Am I calm or am I constantly on edge? Because I've learned to listen to that. And whenever I go anywhere, if it's going out to a restaurant or going to meet someone or in any environment, I can trigger it. It triggers me and I can snap myself out of it straight away. I'm like, okay, I'm not feeling great here. Something's not right. But it takes time to get there because you won't be able to notice it. You will class it as nerves. And you would think it's just your nervous system saying something to you that you're not quite comfortable with something around here. And yeah, you might be embarrassed to meet 20 people at a time. Great. But what is it about that environment right there that is making you uncomfortable? I think that's prioritize that over anything.
Mm-hmm. So, for example, anxiety is really closely kind of entwined with all of this. So low self-esteem, really high self-criticism as well. Like you just tapped on people pleasing. It's that constant need for validation, potentially. You have to look back at the patterns and start to challenge some of those ingrained coping strategies. So for example, you know, you've just said you speak to yourself quite a lot. That's really normal. And that is actually something that we would encourage, for example, in a therapy session. So you want to actively be able to challenge those negative thoughts. You're right, not everybody has the capacity to write down or journal. That's one form of it. But I think just stopping and acknowledging the thought and starting to really pick it apart. It might be, you know, oh, but I have to do this for this person, or they won't value me anymore, or they'll think that I'm a really poor partner, or I'm a really crap friend, or I'm such a terrible mother. Stop and pause with that thought and then start to pick it apart. Am I really a terrible friend because I can't make that particular get together? You know, are they really going to miss me that much, or can I rearrange another day? Because actually I'm really burnt out from my schedule this week. Or, you know, do I have to kind of show up in this particular way for my partner? Because what's the worst thing that could potentially happen if I don't do this, or if I prioritize myself. So it's constantly stopping and cognitively restructuring is the term we use, those negative thought processes. Positive affirmations is an example of this. So positive affirmations is a really popular positive psychology tool that I think is, it's exploded all over TikTok and other social media platforms. But actually the process of positive affirmations is starting to speak kindly to yourself in a way in which you may have not have been spoken to like that before. And what that does by speaking those words out loud, maybe in a mirror, maybe not if you don't feel comfortable with it, but by the process of speaking it out loud actually creates new neural pathways in your brain. The more that you do it, the stronger those neural pathways become. So those positive comments and phrases about yourself will start to form in your brain. And what happens, the stronger the positive ones become, your brain prunes away the pathways that it doesn't use as often. So if you're speaking kind words to yourself, if you're constantly putting yourself first, acknowledging your boundaries, setting your limits, those pathways in your brain will become more stronger, which means habits form in a good and a positive way. And the lesser or the negative or unhealthy habits or coping strategies will gradually fade away.
Yeah, well, ultimately, that will create a positive experience for you. The more you do it, the more you'll feel better, which eventually, as you said, it will lead to more positive thoughts. We all have negative thoughts, by the way. It's not more like some people have them more than others, and I understand that. Or you can have more negative thoughts when you're going through a hard time. You can be the most positive person in the world and have a really difficult time of your life, and you would find yourself that you're the most negative person in the world. And I think, again, balance is the hardest thing to kind of crack in life. I feel like we have times when we go either one way or the other. We're either too much or too this. And I think balance, it's so important in everything, in family life, in relationships, workspace, again, working out, exercise. Everything can be taken to extremes. Again, that's a personality trait where you take everything to extremes. And I've been brought up by personalities like this in my life, and I've quickly learned that it doesn't work. It always crashes somewhere. You work out too much, you're going to burn out. You go to work too much, don't think of anything else, you don't take a break to pause to do something else, you'll burn out. Everything in moderation is, I think, is key to happiness. I personally think that if you do everything in balance, you'll be a much happier person in the future. And it's not rocket science. It's just basic acknowledgement in your day to say, I've worked a lot on this today. I need to pause and do something little for myself, so then I can be a better person for myself, but for everyone else around me. And then you're going to be able to fill someone else's cup at the same time after you filled your own cup.
Definitely. And I think as well, it's about recognizing how this impacts other aspects of your life. So for example, to tie it in with what we were saying, why people suddenly hit a brick wall, I think almost when they hit their 30s or their 40s and start feeling this way, is because of the impact that it has on their relationship in particular. So if you are a codependent person, or if you are feeling in this particular way, it can have a really toxic effect on your relationship. And we're not going to talk about the partner because, there's lots of other elements that they can contribute to in terms of controlling or abusive or being toxic in terms of that partnership. We're just going to talk about how it shows up for you, that person who's feeling this way. I think if you are always dependent and relying on a partner who, you know, you may have got to your 30s, who is starting to become successful or who has become successful, and you've been busy in the background, you know, supporting them, minimizing your own needs, denying your wants and your kind of goals and aspirations in life. Resentment can start to kick in when it seems that actually they're achieving it now. They're on their path. They're moving towards their goals and aspirations, and you feel left behind and you feel stuck. And all of a sudden it's like, well, where do I go from here? Because now I've spent all of this time and resource in supporting you. Now it's almost like I've got to start from scratch. And I think particularly women go through this when their children start to get a little bit older and a little bit more independent, and their days are then filled with, well, where do I go? What do I do? I don't really know who I am, because you've just spent all of your time focused on other people. Now that can breed resentment in your relationship, not just on your behalf, but also on your partner's behalf. Because then suddenly this is where the codependency is of that people pleasing, that kind of, well, I'm waiting for you to decide what we're doing, or you don't have your own life or your own independence.
Yeah, I mean, we could go on about this for ages. I think this is one of them subjects that will trigger everyone. I was going to say everyone because I'm most likely is going to trigger everyone. But I think it's a hard one. Resentment is the killer of everything. I've learned that. I've learned from that. I think, again, we're touching up on communicating with your partner. It's very important that you show your needs. You have to show your needs. It's not something that you should take lightly. You should just be really strongly saying to someone, this is how I'm feeling. And they might turn around and be, you know, it's fine. You know, we're going to sort this out. Or they might be the type of partner that will encourage you to go and follow your dreams and go and pursue something that you really love. It doesn't have to be a big career. It can be something little on the side. If you still want to have, you know, to be focusing on the family life, but just do something that you enjoy, where you go to sleep at night and feel like, oh, I love doing that. And I feel almost like refreshed. Even though I've worked really hard on it, I feel better about myself the next day. And I think, again, you have to find balance in your relationships, that if you're unhappy about your partner and they don't support you in that way, then that's a conversation you need to have with them and then decide what you want to do. Because being in that type of environment is only going to make you more miserable in the long run, and you're only going to build more resentment as you go along with it.
It's, you know, it's so right that it really boils down to your sense of purpose, and that's going to be different for everybody. We're by no means suggesting that this is a radical change or a big change. It might well be for some people, but for other people, it might just be reigniting a passion that you've lost or that you've suppressed. And your purpose might well be, you know, wanting to be that provider for your family and, you know, wanting to be the centre of the home. That's an amazing purpose for some people. Just like other people, their purpose is going out to work and having that independence. It's about finding what really fuels your fire, and then really starting to kind of make small changes to your day to day, so that you start living more towards your authentic self and not masking your emotions, like you said, communicating them, recognizing that actually your feelings are valid. You know, what are my coping strategies? What are my communication styles? What are my unhealthy kind of patterns? What am I suppressing? It's asking yourself all of those questions and being really, really honest with the answers that you give yourself, and then starting to make small tweaks and changes from then on. Codependency is all about you thinking your happiness is dependent on somebody else, when actually your happiness is only truly found within you.
Yeah, well, I think I just want to mention before we finish that this is not us saying go and be an independent person and go and just like try and do something massive. Yeah, maybe do if you want to. But I think ultimately, again, we're talking about balance. And I think, you know, I don't agree with either of the spectrum where it's too much, oh, I want to be independent and I don't care about anything and I don't need a man and I don't need this. Great. But I think you need to find that balance in yourself, what makes you happy. And also, what I've noticed when you're really passionate about something, it doesn't have to be a big thing. You're going to rub it off on your children as well. Your children will see you happy. They're going to see mummy smiling, you know, doing something with passion. And you're gonna enjoy your time with everyone else more. I think that's really important, because if you sit there constantly worrying and be filled with resentment, you're only gonna take that onto someone else, that's especially your children, your family that are around you 24/7. And I think it's important to take that pause, like we said, you know, kind of rewire your brain, how you think about things, and then go from there, like slowly, you know, you're going to win the race eventually. Don't rush it, because then again, you make drastic changes, which will shock your system to the point that you'll get scared off, basically. And then you're not going to be able to kind of cope with the anxiety that the change brings.
Yeah, definitely. Small steps, prioritizing yourself, asking yourself those difficult questions. I think they're all really key points. I think a really good kind of direction to take this in for the next episode that links really quite closely into what we've been talking about, and also answers some of those other questions we got, is why is it that sometimes when we do hit our 30s, we suddenly feel as though we are a different person? Maybe we have been living a lie or not living to our true self. I think that might be quite a good one to explore next.
Yeah, oh God. I could answer that actually.
Save it.
I'll save it for next time, because I've got a lot of stories about that one.
Okay, thank you for listening, everybody. Please do like, subscribe, and share our content. We would be really grateful.
Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
Tune in for the next one. Bye.